चैतन्य मनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपं कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरु श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सगणरघुनाथं नित्यं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य देवं श्रीराधाकृष्ण पादां सगण ललिता श्री विशाखान्वितंश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगत्पति गोपेश गोपिकांत राधाकांत नमस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यः च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। महावदनाय कृष्ण प्रेम प्रदायते कृष्ण कृष्ण चैतन्य नाम गौरतिसे नमः नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण।
मंगलाचरण चेंज करने का प्रयास किया। हम्म। नमो महावदान्याय कहाँ लिखा है? मंगलाचरण दिया ना प्रभुपाद जी ने। अभी इस कॉन में बड़ा ट्रेंड हो गया है, सब अपना कुछ नया ऐड करने का प्रयास करते हैं, जो दिया है उसको फॉलो नहीं करते हैं। आपके पास हिंदी की भगवत गीता है ना?
बढ़िया।
हाँ, उड़िया खोलिए, उसमें चेंज नहीं होगा। मंगलाचरण में कहाँ लिखा है नमो महावदान्याय? प्रभुपाद जी ने जब गीता प्रस्तुत की तो भूमिका के पहले पृष्ठ पे, दूसरे पृष्ठ पे पूरा मंगलाचरण का प्रेयस लिखा है।
जी प्रभु।
देखा है ना आपने?
जी प्रभु।
तो प्रभुपाद से ऊपर कौन आ गया कि उसका फॉलो करने लगे? हम्म। इसलिए बोलना बहुत जरूरी है। जब व्यक्ति बोलता है तो उसके अंदर क्या चल रहा है वो उसके बोलने से पता चल जाता है।
जी
बहुत खतरा है, बहुत खतरा है। हाँ, इसलिए जो प्रभुपाद जी ने प्रोसेस दिया उसको फॉलो करेंगे तो प्यूरिफाई हो जाएंगे, और कुछ नया करने का प्रयास करेंगे तो मुश्किल हो जाएगा। खोलिए,
जी प्रभु।
दोबारा पढ़िए, जो उसमें लिखा है वो पढ़िए मंगलाचरण।
जी।
पढ़ के बोलिए, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है।
हाँ। ओम अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरु श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगण रघुनाथं नित्यं त्वं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य देवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादां सहगण ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितंश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धु जगत्पते गोपेषु गोपिकान्त राधाकान्त नमोऽस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यः च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे।
नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्ण पृष्ठाय
जय भूतले
श्रीमते
श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामिनीति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वते देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देश तारिणे।
थैंक यू। देखिए, प्रभुपाद जी ने इसलिए लिख के दिया है।
जी प्रभु।
तो जो प्रभुपाद जी ने दिया है उसको चेंज मत करने का प्रयास करिए। हम्म।
जी प्रभु।
कोई भी व्यक्ति अगर कर रहा है तो वो फिर परंपरा फॉलो नहीं कर रहा है।
जी प्रभु।
प्योरिफिकेशन है परंपरा फॉलो करने में। अब देखिए अर्जुन क्या बोल रहे हैं। अभी हमने कल देखा कि अर्जुन क्या बोल रहे हैं कि देश कालार्थ युक्तानि हृत तप उपशमानि च हरन्ति स्मरतश्चित्तम् गोविंद अभिहितानि मे. Now I am attracted to those instructions imparted to me by the personality of Godhead. जो भगवान ने गीता में उनको संदेश दिया. क्यों? क्योंकि because they are impregnated with instructions for relieving the burning heart in all circumstances of time and space. And it is for everyone. Going forward, कल हमने डिस्कस किया प्रभुपाद जी कितना ग्लोरीफाई कर रहे हैं किसको? भगवत गीता को. The merciful Lord left behind him the great teachings of Bhagavad Gita, so that one can take the instructions of the Lord even when he is not visible to material eyesight. Material senses cannot have any estimation of the Supreme Lord, but by the inconceivable power, the Lord can incarnate himself to the sense perception of the conditioned soul in a suitable manner through the agency of matter, which is also another form of the Lord's manifested energy. Thus, the Bhagavad Gita or any authentic scriptural sound representation of the Lord is also an incarnation of the Lord. There is no difference between the sound representation of the Lord and the Lord himself. One can derive the same benefit from Bhagavad Gita as Arjuna did in the personal presence of the Lord. That is why we should be convinced. Where is this conviction coming from? This is coming from our Acharya as Pram. And who is the foremost person? Arjuna. We see Arjuna is in this very difficult and distressed situation. He is saying, now my heart is attracted to the instructions. Because if I follow the instructions, I will be relieved from the separation, the intense feeling of separation, the burning, the fire of separation which was burning in his heart. It can only be relieved by the process of following the instructions in Bhagavad Gita. If it is for Arjuna, why it is not for others? So Prabhupada is saying it is for everyone. Verse number 28. Now Suta Goswami is speaking. Suta uvacha evam chintayato jishno krishna pada saroruham sauhardena atigadena shanta asit vimalamati. Suta Goswami said, thus being deeply absorbed in thinking of the instructions of the Lord, which were imparted in the great intimacy of friendship, and in thinking of lotus feet, in thinking of his lotus feet, Arjuna's mind became pacified and free from all material contamination. Since the Lord is absolute, deep meditation upon him is as good as yogic trance. Bhagwan ne bola, man mana bhav mad bhakto, that we should be able to meditate upon him. Krishna says, always think about me. Man mana mad bhav. The Lord is not different from his name, form, qualities, pastime, entourage, and specific actions. Arjuna began to think of the Lord's instruction to him on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Only those instructions began to eliminate the tinges of material contamination in the mind of Arjuna. The Lord is like the sun. The sun's appearance means immediate dissipation of darkness or ignorance. And the Lord's appearance within the mind of the devotee can at once drive away the miserable material effects. Lord Chaitanya has therefore recommended constant chanting of the name of the Lord for protection from all contamination of the material world. The feeling of separation from the Lord is undoubtedly painful to a devotee, but because it is in connection with the Lord, it has a specific transcendental effect which pacifies the heart. Feeling of separation are also sources of transcendental bliss. This is very, very advanced stage. Feeling of separation is also the source of transcendental bliss. And they are never comparable to contaminated material feelings of separation. Vasudevangri anudhyana paribhramita ramhasa bhaktya nirmithita ashesha kasaya dhishana Arjuna. Arjuna's constant remembrance of the lotus feet of Lord Shri Krishna वासुदेव आंग्रिः अनुध्यानः. Anudhyana. Dhyana means to meditate or to constantly think. And anudhyana means to meditate as it has been prescribed. So what is the way Krishna prescribes to remember him? Who remembers? Vasudev Angri Anudhyana. So how we should remember Krishna? Krishna gives himself the process and the different ways to be able to meditate upon him. Anyone remembers where he gives? कहाँ भगवान बताते हैं उनके ऊपर कैसे ध्यान लगाना है? How to meditate on Krishna? भगवान बोलते हैं ना, you should always think about me. मन मना भव. How to think? So Krishna gives the guided meditation in Bhagavad Gita. Where and what are the ways to think about him? बोलिए, we have done this, we have covered. The word is here, anudhyanena. So simply Krishna says, anuchintayan. How we should meditate on Krishna? Where Krishna is recommending how to meditate on him? Otherwise, it will become speculation. It will become mental speculation. बोलो, किसी को नहीं ध्यान है? Where Krishna is recommending how to meditate upon him? In what form? So time is already passing by. It is reaching 9. We just began. How one should meditate on Krishna? Krishna gives the guidance. Anuchintayan. What are the ways in Krishna recommends to meditate? It is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. Clearly Krishna says how to meditate upon him. Yes, Dayashil Prabhu.
हरे कृष्ण प्रभु जी। मच्चित मतगत प्राण बोधयन्ते परस्पर.
No. That is the recommendation. He says that you bring your attention, your focus, your consciousness on me. But in what way to meditate? That is in the 8th chapter. 8th chapter, 8th verse. 8th verse he says that you should meditate. And how one has to meditate? Krishna gives the process. Abhyasa yoga yuktena chetasa nanagamina paramam purusham divyam yati partha anuchintayam. So he recommends what you have to do. Yati partha anuchintayam. How one has to remember Krishna? Kavim Puranam Anushashitaram Anor Aniya Amsa Anusmaredaya Sarvasya Dhata Ramachinta Rupam Aditya Varnam Damasa Parasta. So Krishna gives 9 ways how to meditate upon him. I've discussed this so many times with you. Have I not? So you find out the details. What are the 9 ways to meditate upon Krishna? Yati Partha anuchintayam. The Prabhupada says, one should meditate upon the Supreme Person as the one who knows everything that is coming. Then he is Puranam. Then he is Anushashitaram. Very beautiful. These are called the guided meditation. That is why it is Anuchintayam. We have to think about Krishna. We have to meditate about Krishna as Krishna declares himself. Otherwise, it will be speculation. So here Arjuna is meditating on what Krishna gave him the instructions. So Vasudev Angri Anudhyana. Arjuna's constant remembrance of the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna rapidly increased his devotion. He is already a pure devotee, but there is no limit to the devotion and surrender of a pure devotee. So when he remembered, when he meditated on the lotus feet of the Lord in the form of his instruction, Sri Krishna rapidly increased his devotion, and as a result, all the thrash in his thoughts subsidized. What a beautiful way. In our mind is like a thrash bin. सुना है ना? हमारा मन क्या है? कचरे का डब्बा. All the उसके अंदर भरा क्या है? What is contained inside the mind? It is all dirt. It is all garbage. It is all useless. So how to purify? How to cleanse it? That process Arjuna is teaching us. Material desires in the mind are the trash of material contamination. Prabhupada starts from here only. The mind is a storehouse of what? It is like a thrash. Thrash का मतलब है कूड़ा, कचरा. But by such contamination, the living being is faced with so many compatible and incompatible things that discourage the very existence of spiritual identity. Birth after birth, the conditioned soul is entrapped with so many pleasing and displeasing elements, which are all false and temporary. They accumulate due to our reaction to material desires. But when we get in touch with the transcendental Lord in his variegated energies by devotional service, the naked form of all material desires become manifest, and the intelligence of the living being is specified in its true color. As soon as Arjuna turned his attention towards the instructions of the Lord, as they are inculcated in the Bhagavad Gita, it's very important. See, as soon as Arjuna turned his attention towards the instructions of the Lord, as they are inculcated in the Bhagavad Gita, his true color of eternal association with the Lord became manifest, and thus he felt freed from all material contamination. It's very important. It requires discussion actually. What it means to turn one's attention towards the instructions of the Lord. Actually speaking, still that stage is far off when we turn our attention towards the instructions of the Lord. What is the verse? There is a verse Srila Prabhupada quotes in Srimad Bhagavad Gita. In particularly in respect to Arjuna, there is a verse from Shweta Upanishad, and also it is there in the Mundoka Upanishad. Anyone remembers the verse? What it means to turn the face towards Krishna and hear from him. Prabhupada writes in that purport, this is in the second chapter, now Arjuna has turned his face towards Krishna and is hearing from him. So from Bahirmukh, one becomes Sanmukh. Very beautiful verse. Anyone remembers the verse? Such a verse comes even in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Krishna bhuliya jiv anadi bahirmukha. Find out Manoram Prabhu. Krishna bhuliya jiv anadir bahirmukha. Find out. I'm just joining. What happened? You're not having laptop?
Yes, Prabhuji, opened. I am sharing, Prabhuji.
Okay. Very beautiful verse. Again, this is the instruction from Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Srila Sanatana Goswami. These 6 chapters are so miraculous. 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. Everything of Krishna consciousness is discussed here. कृष्ण भूला से जीव अनादिर बहिर्मुखा अतएव माया तारे दे samsara dukha. Forgetting Krishna, the living entity has been attracted by the external features from time immemorial. From where? It is anadir bahirmukha. Bahirmukha means that he has turned his face away from Krishna. Therefore, the illusionary energy Maya gives him all kinds of misery in his material existence. Show the purport. Read, Manoram Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Purport. When the living entity forgets his constitutional position as an eternal servant of Krishna, he is immediately entrapped by the illusory external energy. The living entity is originally part and parcel of Krishna and is therefore the superior energy of Krishna. He is endowed with inconceivable minute energy that works inconceivably within the body. However, the living entity, forgetting his position, is situated in material energy. The living entity is called the marginal energy because by nature he is spiritual, but by forgetfulness he is situated in the material energy. Thus, he has the power to live either in the material energy or in the spiritual energy. And for this reason, he is called marginal energy. Being in the marginal position, he is sometimes attracted by the external illusionary energy, and this is the beginning of his material life. When he enters the material energy, he is subjected to the threefold time measurement, past, present, and future. Past, present, and future belongs only to the material world. They do not exist in the spiritual world. The living entity is eternal and he existed before the creation of this material world. Unfortunately, he has forgotten his relationship with Krishna. The living entity's forgetfulness is described herein as Anadi, which indicates that it has existed since time immemorial. One should understand that due to his desire to enjoy himself in competition with Krishna, the living entity comes into material existence.
Okay, thank you. Close it. So Arjuna was overwhelmed and he took shelter of the instructions of Bhagavad Gita. Taking shelter of the instructions of Bhagavad Gita means to turn one's face towards Krishna. Material desires in the mind are the trash of material contamination. By such contamination, the living being is faced with so many compatible and incompatible things that discourage the very existence of spiritual identity. Birth after birth, the conditioned soul is entrapped with so many pleasing and displeasing elements, which are all false and temporary. They accumulate due to our reactions to material desires, but we get in touch with the transcendental Lord in his variegated energies by devotional service. The naked forms of all material desires becomes manifest, and the intelligence of the living being is pacified in its true color. As soon as Arjuna turned his attention towards the instruction of the Lord, as they are incalculated in the Bhagavad Gita, his true color of eternal association with the Lord became manifest, and thus he felt freed from all material contaminations. Gitam Bhagavata Jnanam Yattat Sangram Murdhani Kala Karma Tamoruddham Punar Adhyagamat Prabhu. Because the Lord pastime and activities and Arjuna's feeling of separation from him it appeared that Arjuna forgot the instructions left by the personality of Godhead. But factually, this was not the case, and again he became lord of his senses. A conditioned soul is enwrapped in his fruitive activities by the force of eternal time. But the Supreme Lord, when he incarnates on the earth, is not influenced by Kal or material conception of past, present, and future. The activities of the Lord are eternal, and they are manifestations of his Atma Maya or internal potency. All pastimes or activities of the Lord are spiritual in nature, but to the layman, they appear to be on the same level with material activities. Thus, it appeared that Arjuna and the Lord were engaged in the battle of Kurukshetra as the other party was also engaged. But factually, the Lord was executing his mission of incarnation in association with his eternal friend Arjuna. Therefore, such apparently material activities of Arjuna did not drive him away from his transcendental position. But on the contrary, relieved his consciousness of the songs of the Lord as he had sung them personally. The revival of consciousness is assured by the Lord in Bhagavad Gita 8:65 as follows. Same verse comes. Manmana bhava mad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mame vashyasi satyam te pratijane priyosi me. One should think of the Lord always. The mind should not forget him. One should become a devotee of the Lord and offer obeisances unto him. One who lives in that fashion becomes undoubtedly endowed with the blessings of the Lord by achieving the shelter of his lotus feet. There is nothing to doubt about the eternal truth. Because Arjuna was his confidential friend, the secret was disclosed to him. Arjuna had no desire to fight with his relative, but he fought for the mission of the Lord. He was always engaged in the execution of his mission only. And therefore, after the Lord's departure, he remained in the same transcendental position, even though it appeared that he forgot all the instructions of the Bhagavad Gita. One should therefore adjust the activities of life in pace with the mission of the Lord. And by doing so, one is sure to return home back to Godhead. That is the highest perfection of life. So in a way, Arjuna again put his full attention and his full focus on trying to execute what Krishna gave him the message in Bhagavad Gita. And just by meditating on the Lord and remembering the instructions of Bhagavad Gita, his mind became pacified. He came in the transcendental position. Vishokho Brahma Sampatya Sanchinnad Dvait Samshaya Lina Prakriti Nirgunya Alingatvad Asambhava. Because of his possessing spiritual assets, the doubts of dualities were completely cut off. Thus, he was freed from the three modes of material nature and placed in transcendence. There was no longer any chance of his becoming entangled in birth and death, for he was freed from material form. Doubts of duality begin from the misconception of the material body, which is accepted by the self by less intelligent persons. The most foolish part of our ignorance is our identifying this material body with the self. Everything in relation with the body is ignorantly accepted as our own. Doubts due to misconceptions of myself and mine. In other words, my body, my relatives, my property, my wife, my children, my wealth, my country, my community, and hundreds and thousands of similar illusionary contemplations cause bewilderment for the conditioned soul. By assimilating the instructions of the Bhagavad Gita, one is sure to be released from such bewilderment, because real knowledge is knowledge that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudev Shri Lord Krishna, is everything, including oneself. Everything is a manifestation of his potency as part and parcel. The potency and the potent are non-different, so the conception of duality is at once mitigated by attainment of perfect knowledge. As soon as Arjuna took up the instructions of the Bhagavad Gita, as he was, he could at once eradicate the material conception of Lord Krishna, his eternal friend. He could realize that the Lord was still present before him by the instructions, by his form, and by his pastimes, by his qualities, and by everything else related to him. He could realize that Lord Krishna, his friend, was still present before him by his transcendental presence in different non-dual energies, and that there was no question of attainment of the association of the Lord by another change of body under the influence of time and space. By attainment of absolute knowledge, one can be in the association of the Lord constantly. Very important. By attainment of absolute knowledge, one can be in the association of the Lord constantly. Even in this present life, simply by hearing, chanting, and thinking of the Supreme Lord and worshipping Him. 4 things. Hearing, chanting, thinking of the Supreme Lord constantly. Even in this present life, simply by hearing, chanting, and thinking of Supreme Lord and worshipping Him. One can see Him and feel His presence even in His present life simply by understanding the Advai Gyan. Advai Gyan is, who remembers what is Advai Gyan? Where it comes? What is Advai Gyan? This sentence Prabhupada is saying, one can see Him and feel His presence even in the present life simply by understanding the Advai Gyan. What is Advai Gyan? Why I'm asking, I'm just wanting to know how much you have understood. We have covered this. Bolo, Advai Gyan is not new. What is Advai Gyan? Manoram Prabhu, you should be knowing what is Advai Gyan.
Prabhuji, it is of non-duality.
Yes, very good. It is non-dual. Yes, Advai Gyan means which is non-dual. That is non-different from the Supreme Lord. It comes in Vedanti Tattas Vidas Tattvam Yad Jnanam Advayam. That is Advai Gyan. Yad Jnanam Avyam. What is that Jnanam? Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagwaniti Shabdate. Simply by understanding the Advai Gyan Lord or the Absolute Lord through the process of devotional service, which begins with hearing about Him. Lord Chaitanya says that simply by chanting the holy name, one can at once wash off the dust on the mirror of pure consciousness. And as soon as the dust is removed, one is at once freed from all material conditions. To become free from material conditions means to liberate the soul. Very important. To become free from material condition means to liberate the soul. As soon as one is therefore situated in absolute knowledge, his material conception of life is removed. Or he emerges from the false conception of life. Thus, the function of the pure soul is revived in spiritual realization. This practical realization of the living being is made possible due to his becoming free from the reaction of the 3 modes of material nature, namely goodness, passion, and ignorance. By the grace of the Lord, a pure devotee is at once raised to the plane of the Absolute. And there is no chance of the devotees becoming materially entangled again in conditioned life. One is not liable to feel the presence of the Lord in all circumstances until one is endowed with the required transcendental vision, which is made possible by devotional service prescribed in the revealed scriptures. Arjuna had attained this stage long before on the battle of Kurukshetra. And when he apparently felt the absence of the Lord, he at once took shelter of the instructions of Bhagavad Gita. And thus again he was placed in his original position. This is the position of Vishoka, or the stage of being free from all grief and all anxieties. निशम्य भगवान् मार्गं समस्तां यदुकुलस्य च स्वपथाया मतिं चाक्रे निबृहात्मा युधिष्ठिरः. Upon hearing of Lord Krishna's returning to his abode and upon understanding the end of the Yadu dynasty's earthly manifestations, Maharaj Yudhishthira decided to go back home, back to Godhead. So this is what the sum and substance of this chapter is. As soon as Yudhishthira Maharaj came to know that Lord Krishna has returned, so he decided to immediately return, to give up all his position. Maharaj Yudhishthira also turned his attention to the instructions of the Bhagavad Gita after hearing about the Lord's departure from the vision of earthly people. He began to deliberate on the Lord's way of appearance and departure. The mission of the Lord's appearance and disappearance in the mortal universe is completely dependent on his supreme will. He is not forced to appear or disappear by any superior energy, as the living being appears and disappears being forced by the laws of nature. Whenever the Lord likes, he can appear anywhere and wherever without disturbing his appearance and disappearance in any other place. He is like the sun. The sun appears and disappears of its own accord at any place without disturbing its presence in other places. The sun appears in the morning in India without disappearing from the Western Hemisphere. The sun is present everywhere and anywhere all over the universe. But it so appears that in a particular place, the sun appears in the morning and also disappears at some fixed time in the evening. The time limitation even of the sun is of no concern. So what to speak of the Supreme Lord, who is the creator and controller of the sun? Therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that anyone who factually understands the transcendental appearance and disappearance of the Lord by his inconceivable energy becomes liberated from the laws of birth and death and is placed in the eternal spiritual sky where the Vaikuntha planets are. Janma karma cha me divyam. There, such liberated persons can eternally live without the pangs of birth, death, old age, and disease. In the spiritual sky, the Lord and those who are eternally engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord are all eternally young, because there is no old age or disease, and therefore there is no death. And because there is no death, there is no birth. It is concluded, therefore, that simply by understanding the Lord's appearance and disappearance in truth, one may attain the perfection stage of eternal life. Therefore, Maharaj Yudhishthira also began to consider going back to Godhead. The Lord appears on the earth or any other mortal planet along with his associates who live with him eternally. And the members of the Yadu family who are engaged in supplementing the pastimes of the Lord are none other than his eternal associates. And so are and also are Maharaj Yudhishthira and his brothers and mothers. Since the appearance and disappearance of the Lord and his eternal associates are transcendental, one should not be bewildered by the external features of appearance and disappearance. I'll stop here. So we see how Arjuna is reposing his faith by taking shelter of the instructions given in Bhagavad Gita. And as soon as Maharaj Yudhishthira hears that Lord Chaitanya has returned back to his spiritual abode, he also immediately makes a firm resolve to return back. Hare Krishna. Any discussion, inquiry, question, contributions? No one? Well, and here, it is already getting late. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai, all glories to the